Ready to rock and roll. I'm Phil Francois. I'm here today with Darren Delosier. So I'm the founder and financial planner at Foundation Wealth Planning, and Darren is also a financial planner here at Foundation Wealth Planning. He's got a lot of great experience from Catholic Answers. He's went to Steubenville, has a lot of great knowledge on the faith and intermixing that with the finances. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about Rerum Novarum. Pope Leo the 14th has been in the news a lot, and thought it'd be really good. He's talked about how he wants to kind of continue some of the things that Leo the 13th has talked about. And one very important document from Leo the 13th is Rerum Novarum, Rights and Duties of Capital and Labor. And there's some things we can talk about. It's a very amazing document, a lot of great stuff. And we're going to talk about things kind of from a personal finance lens, maybe a little bit of macro stuff, but should be a good discussion. Darren, thanks for joining us. How you doing today?
Hey, thanks, Phil. Good to see you. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about kind of, a little bit about you, and then also maybe what your biggest takeaway is from Rerum Novarum, and we'll just kind of hop into it.
Sure. My name's Darren Delosier. I'm a financial planner at Foundation Wealth Planning, and I'm also a radio producer at Catholic Answers. And actually, today's my 20th anniversary of working at Catholic Answers.
Awesome.
Today we're recording this. And I went to Steubenville for my undergrad, a master's degree in theology from the Augustine Institute. And so I love looking at how faith and finance intertwine.
Love it.
So that's where I'm at. And so was super excited when I heard that papal announcement of the name he chose, Leone, and I knew, oh my gosh, it's Leo. I had not expected that. I was thinking, John Paul, Benedict, maybe a new name like Dominic or something to go with Francis.
Yeah.
And then when I heard that Leo, I thought, of course, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Leo XIII is almost synonymous with Rerum Novarum. He was one of the most prolific writers of recent popes, but Rerum Novarum is one of his main ones in 1891. And you asked my key takeaway. I think my key takeaway from there, as I reread it after the announcement, is number 46. I think Rerum Novarum, it's only got like 62 paragraphs, something like that. So it's not like one of these modern encyclicals that takes a few days to read. You can really sit down and knock it out in probably an hour or two. And so I read in number 46. It kind of said it all to me. It says a lot, but it kind of summed it up. If a workman's wages be sufficient to enable him comfortable to support himself, his wife, and his children, he will find it easy, if he is a sensible man, to practice thrift, and he will not fail, by cutting down expenses, to put some little savings and thus secure a modest source of income. And then this next line, nature itself would urge him to do this. So it's just kind of just telling us, take care of your families. Do what you need to do, of course, within the context of Christian morality. Take care of your family.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's that I highlighted that exact same line. That hit me pretty hard as well. And there's a few things you can take from that. In this day and age, there's a lot more things we can buy than you could have in the 1890s. Although there probably were some cool things you could buy, top of the line stuff, but there's so many ways that we can spend our money now. And so this talks about if we can have a modest wage, but if we live in a way that is not needing all of the finer things in life. If we live a modest lifestyle, then we should be able to save, live our life, and maybe even better our life a little bit. But we're not trying to live extravagantly. And I think that's a key point, especially as inflation has kind of gotten out of control. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to make it work. And some of that is things are just very expensive. But another part of it is we like the finer things in life, right? That's like our human nature. Whatever the new thing is, we want to buy that thing. We want to have the bigger house, the nicer car. Yeah. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of look back within to figure out, well, what should we do within our own life to make sure that we can live within our means.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not. Well, I'll say this. He says Christian morality. This is number 28. Christian morality, when adequately and completely practiced, leads itself to temporal prosperity. So basically, live like a Christian, be virtuous, or at least strive to be virtuous, and you're going to have a better chance of things working out for you, money-wise. And this is not the prosperity gospel of Joel Osteen.
Thank you for clarifying that.
This is not the preacher on TV with the private jet and the shiny teeth. It's just kind of common sense. It's just nature. Like, just be a good person. Try to do the right thing. Don't try to squeeze every dollar out of every transaction. Be generous. And things, not only are you happier because of this, but you're generally more better off financially.
Yeah. And I think a thing that he ties in within, because it restrains the greed of possession and the thirst for pleasure, and that's often where we spend frivolously, right? So if we can have a moral life that's rooted in Christ, we will tend to stray less, although we're all still sinners, no matter how hard we try, but stray less to some of those other indulgences that would also not only zap our, kind of our moral fortitude, but also our money, right? Some of those things cost money, whether it be gambling or excessive drinking or whatever the thing is, it costs money, and that makes it hard to stay in line financially as well as spiritually.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, so I just think that's a kind of a practical. I find that the one theme, it's a very practical document, and it ties so much into the concept of how do we handle our physical bodies and everything here. That's one thing that stands out, but it also talks obviously about our spiritual life, and that sometimes obviously the secular world is like, we're only the body and just pleasure as much as you want.
Yeah.
And then there's some corners of Christianity where we're very spiritual and the body doesn't matter. Whereas we are both, right? We're physical and we're spiritual. And I think he does an incredible job of kind of interweaving that in between the both, while giving practical advice for our physical bodies in our life here, but also then having the ultimate goal of heaven, not forgetting that piece too.
Yeah.
And so I am always struck when I read some of these older encyclicals just how much that practicality comes in, and especially this one. I just find it to be very practical with life for our time here and then beyond.
Yes, it's like that with the Christian life so much, where you got these two extremes, and let's find that happy medium between the two extremes, that moderate point. And that's kind of like the structure of this document. I'd say there's two kind of bad guys in this document: socialism and unfettered capitalism. Kind of capitalism understood in this way. He's not talking about just free market, but kind of all the bad things that go away, that came up in the Industrial Revolution. And he's saying, hey, okay, on this side you got socialism, but you got to remember we have a right to private property. He very explicitly says that. And then on the other side, unfettered capitalism. Okay, well, you have to remember, you have to treat people like people as well. They're not machines for your money-making venture. They're people. And so this document is really, how do we hold to those core principles that find that medium between these two extremes.
Yeah, in fact, he quotes St. Thomas Aquinas, the good doctor, that it's lawful and for a man to hold private property, and it's also necessary for the carrying out of human existence, right? So the idea that your private property and your family he talks about this too, that it supersedes the state, right? The state doesn't own our stuff and it doesn't own our life, right? The family is the main unit of society. And it actually, he talks about how it's superseded. It's the society that has superseded any society, right? The family has been around since the beginning of time, whereas nations rise and fall, and socialism always falls. And so there's the idea that we have, it is just to have our private property. In fact, one line that I love so much in there, that we have the ability to have a just wage, right? But then wages, when we then buy, he uses land as an example, but any asset is just wages under another form.
Yes.
Which, man, so good. So good. And the idea that we earn this wage and then we're just going to buy assets with it that we get to hold, right? The state doesn't have ownership of those. And that is for the good of the family and then ultimately society at large to do that, right? Again, not just piling up for the sake of piling up as many assets as we can, but so that we can support our family and then more broadly society, but not so that the state can get more powerful.
Yeah. And that made me think of, oddly enough, of buying stocks. Okay, because I mean, Pope Leo's he's talking about a society coming out of an agrarian society, and it really a little bit past the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But so he's talking about a lot about the land, but we can't all be farmers. So we can own businesses, and I think some people struggle with the idea of owning stocks because it's just a piece of paper. It just seems real speculative, like, I buy a piece of paper or a digital code, and then one day I sell it for more. But it is ownership. I think of it like pretend you own a laundromat, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You're helping people. You're helping your family, because the laundromat hopefully brings in more money than you spend maintaining the machines and purchasing the building and all that. So that's a good thing for your family. It's a good thing for your customers. So business ownership, great thing. And stocks, well, it's like that on a very, very, very tiny share of that. But you're participating in something, all things being equal, on something good, as long as they're not doing something bad. But on the principle itself, you're participating in ownership of something good.
Yeah, no, that's a key point. Yeah, although the stocks, you could invest in stocks back in the 1890s. It was not nearly as prevalent now, and the way that we can buy it. So the way money and assets have kind of moved over time has shifted, and so land was obviously the prime asset to be a landowner, which then could produce food, which then you could use yourself and then sell as well. That was the prime asset, and it still is a solid asset today. But it's hard, obviously. Yeah, it's hard to have everybody be a landowner. It's expensive, and no one can. We're just not in that society. But we are in a society in our current environment where there's a lot of service-based businesses. There's a lot of consumer-based businesses, and owning a piece of those is again, it's not wrong to be a shareholder in those companies. Now there's a whole another line. We can do another video maybe about maybe the morality of what we're investing in with those businesses, right? We want to try to make sure that is in line as much as we can with Catholic social teaching. However, the concept behind the stock market is just as you stated. We're simply owning a share of these businesses because no one would object to your example of, like, we have a family laundromat and we own that. Right. And we earn profits off of that, right? As people put the quarters in and do 10 loads of laundry, we're earning money on that above and beyond the expenses. And no one has a problem with that. But as a big company that's public, earns profits and shares those profits back with the shareholders, that's where some people maybe just from lack of knowledge get a little bit squeamish on it. But it is definitely kind of in line with this of private property and owning businesses and all of that. even though it is a different asset class than land than what Pope Leo specifically talks about in this document.
Yep, exactly.
And I think there's a couple of things that I was struck by, but one, so we've talked a little bit about socialism and how that's bad and private property. This document can be a very political document if you want it to be. We're not going to make it that much of a point, but I think if we go back to that unfettered capitalism part which we talked about, I have a few points on that, but let's dive in on that. When you say that, because we're certainly not socialist, but we're also, unfettered capitalism is not really part of Catholic social teaching. And so when you say that, what would you mean by that? Can you give a little more of an explanation or definition on that?
Sure. Well, you got to treat people like people, and not machines. And so that means, what does that mean? It means, well, could I get away with paying them less? Probably. But should I pay them more than that? Yeah, probably should. Do you, if it's, say there's high unemployment and everybody needs a job, everybody needs to work, and there's not enough jobs, well, gosh, you could really squeeze people. You could really make them work 7 days a week. But no, would the bottom line on your company be better if you did? Yeah, probably, but you got to let people rest. You got to let people be with their families. It's safe working conditions. That was a huge issue at this time with the factories, and paying them fairly.
Yeah, he specifically talks about how you should be able to support your family on your wages within a normal working day, right? You shouldn't have to work overtime. You shouldn't have to work a second job. And again, he's talking about a modest lifestyle, right? So if you want those extra things, I guess maybe you'd have to work more. But in terms of being able to provide the base level of security and needs for your family, you have the shelter and the food that you need and the transportation to get around, all the basics. You should be able to earn that within your normal wages from your job. And maybe that's not realistic for every single job, right? We have different types of places now. I mean, like restaurants, for example, very low margins. Maybe it's difficult for some of those places to pay that. I don't know. But in a lot of cases, in a lot of jobs, we could and maybe should pay more than what we're paying, right? Because could you get someone to work for less, like you said? Well, yeah, if they're desperate, they're going to take less. And but is that just, right? They're working hard. They're giving everything. They're doing all the jobs you've asked them to do, but yet they can't fully support their family. They got to go work a second job or whatever. That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
And really it's all about the whole like maximizing of profits, right? Like you had said, that we as business owners, and this is big for like the mega corporations too, right? This is a big deal. They're trying to impress on their earnings calls and show, hey, we are profitable by this much. We had so many earnings and we have this gigantic profit margin. It's a great business. Great to be us. Whereas, maybe they're paying minimum wage to their employees or maybe just above that or whatever. And it's like, well, a smaller profit margin would be a better good to then give that to your employees, because it's not that you're giving them for free. It's that they're giving them their just wage and what they're due, right? And so again, how do we battle against this? I guess it's called the sin against justice, right? If you're intentionally withholding that, you could pay them more, but you don't, and you're not giving their just due for what they should be earning. That can be problematic.
Yeah. And that's what the virtue of justice is all about. We kind of think of justice as, okay, well, what's owed to me? What's just for me? But really, the virtue of justice is all about what do I owe to others.
Oh, hey, that's good. Yeah. Flip it on its head a little bit.
And if everybody would just act like that, then you would get your just due as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So really a big call to business owners on how are we treating our employees? Are we giving them the time off that they need? Not asking them to work unreasonable hours? Are we paying them a just wage? And are they, are they dignified in their work, right? Are you making them do things that are just, losing their dignity basically? And there's certainly a lot of jobs or people that make things that people could do online that maybe, would violate that. A lot of opportunities there, but as business owners, how do we do that? And then also, how do we? He then calls the people that have the money. So the business owners are getting multiple call outs in this about paying the just wage and treating our employees well. But then typically, and if you've got a successful business, you're typically one of the wealthier people in your community. That's just the bottom line. You take the risk of starting a business, you get rewarded for that if it pays off, right? And so that's not wrong. If you have a successful business, you probably are monetarily well compensated for the risk you took on to start the business. But with that comes a lot of responsibility, right? It's you can almost see Spider-Man through this, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Like that kind of comes through the pages in some of these paragraphs that he writes about the responsibility we have for our employees, but then just for the society as a whole. And he even talks about, what paragraph is it? Oh man, I'm blanking on it. I was going to read it specifically, but I don't have it. He talks about how we should, as a business owner, also help our employees be morally righteous and try to remove ourselves from, basically the perils of an immoral life. And he has a phrasing in there that's really good. I should have had it pulled up. But anyway, he talks about that's as a business owner, that we're not only helping these other things, but really helping kind of provide a moral framework for the people that we're living in, and help them save money and not spend it on things that are degenerate, basically. Do you have any comments on that part?
Yeah, no, I think it might have been in paragraph 20. I got some notes on that. On paragraph 20, he basically lays out the duties of the worker.
That's exactly the paragraph I was talking about, yes.
The duties of the worker, and then the duties of the wealthy owner or the employer. And one thing that really jumped out at me is he says, again in number 20, towards the bottom, because the laboring man is, as a rule, weak and unprotected, and because his slender means should, in proportion to their scantiness, be accounted sacred. So he actually uses the word sacred to describe like what the owner is paying the laborer. I mean, that's how important this is.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think the obviously the thread that runs through all of this is like, how do we, as business owners and people that are maybe made it to a higher wealth status in life, how do we have moral virtue that can, lead society? And that doesn't, anybody that's also he has kind of the two different classes of people that have, made it wealthier than the working and middle classes. And they're both obviously very equally valued in the eyes of God. However, they have different resources here on earth, different states in life, but they're both called to be moral, but maybe they have different ways of being moral, right? Because we have different means, we have different responsibilities in life. But with the means that you have, right, supporting those around us, and again, taking that, because we're not socialists here, we don't want the state to be the ones that are primarily taking care of those that have less. That should be done through the church and through the moral virtue of the people that have more, that they willingly share. They're not forced to share. It's not taken from them, but they're willingly able to share and support those that maybe have less or that need some help along the way.
Yes. And I think as sometimes, I don't know if it's just being a modern American or what, but I just want the number. Just give me the number of like what's moral, what's the line. That's the, like it's kind of like at mass. Okay, at what time? When do I walk in and I'm too late to have said I've attended mass that
right,
day?
Yeah.
And I think the church wisely does not draw that hard and fast line for us. It doesn't. The church actually doesn't say, like, if you're there for the first word of the gospel reading, then
Right.
you've made it to mass. It just kind of it lets you decide, or it lets you be the judge, and so everybody has to kind of. We have some principles. We have the principles here, but you have to apply them to your own situation, because the church doesn't put everybody in the same box. It knows it's dealing with a whole world of, and every situation is unique. So everybody has to take these principles and really consider with prudence how it applies to them.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and it's not this, this hustle culture that we've got to just make as much as we can just to have it, right? Again, there needs to be some moral framework within there, and again, everybody has a different state, and your conscience should guide you, but you should have a well-formed conscience, right? Which is kind of the baseline for all of this, is to kind of have an idea of where we should be morally. But everyone's situation is a little bit different, and but this has just some really great rules, and I think it's really interesting as we're moving in. I think from what it sounded like, Pope Leo has talked about how he wants to kind of continue from where Leo the 13th left off, and as we were coming into the Industrial Revolution in the 1890s, we're certainly coming into what appears to be another revolution coming in the coming years with supercomputers and AI and super robots and things like that. And there's so much dignity. He talks about the dignity of work. Having work is a dignified piece, and really it's part of a good and just society to have that. And if jobs start to get eliminated and we have higher unemployment, well, that, to your point from earlier, right, could cause business owners to say, well, I could pay less because you're desperate. Or if I'm not going to pay you this amount of wage, I could just get a robot to do your job. There's going to be some really interesting questions we have to get worked out here. But I think just having business owners be vigilant and just to have this kind of ingrained in them that there's a higher good than just profits. Right? Your business provides jobs and does a lot of good things in the community. And just because we could do something that would eliminate a job and save us and make us more money, should we always do that? And that's going to be a big question that's maybe hard to answer right now, but we're going to need to figure that out pretty fast, because that's coming out hot and heavy down the pipeline. The train's on the tracks, and I don't really know where all it's going, but I think getting some clarity around some of that will be helpful, hopefully from the Vatican, but also we can start to kind of form our consciousness around that of how do we think we're going to handle that when that comes up, because that's going to be a big deal in the coming years.
Yeah, I'm glad Pope Leo's addressing this right now, because I think Leo the 13th, I love that he wrote Rerum Novarum. I also kind of wish it had come out like 40 years before. I think it's wise that the Catholic Church generally acts slowly, but anyway, I'm just glad that this is being addressed now, because somebody has to be out there saying the principles and thinking about the principles of how we do this without losing our humanity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, what makes us human, and so many big questions that are wrapped up in that question right there. And yeah, and when do we lose it? Where's the line? And all the technology that they say is coming, which maybe is overblown, maybe it's not. There's a lot of people that think that this stuff's coming pretty fast. And anyway, I think it'll be interesting. Can be scary, but we shouldn't fear, right? We got to have trust in the Lord, but not to say that we can't try to figure out how we're going to prudently handle all these situations while we're here.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of hope of what it can bring. I mean, with these really crazy new technologies, when they come out, it does generate a lot of fear, for good reason, because there's a lot of unknown. But I mean, honestly, they've also helped reduce a lot of poverty in the world. I mean, the amount of poverty in the world is so much less than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, this could aid that as well. Now, there's going to be people losing jobs because of this new technology, and that hurts, and that's not good. And I'm not saying like we need to sacrifice some for the good of the whole. It's more of like, well, these things will develop, and let's try to smooth the path so that we're just treating people well. And I think as long as we're acting within Christian morality, you know, this could be a very good thing. Now, it's kind of pie in the sky. I know that's not going to happen. Like, people are going to abuse this. But all we can do is what we can do. We can't control them. We can just say and try to do how we think the technology should be used.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think if we can have again a moral and just society, then that makes me feel a little bit better about where things are going. So it just depends on whose hands it's in, I guess. Anyway, any final pieces just about this document, the self, or you know what we should be doing as Christians financially based on this document, or anything that you think we should end on here?
I mean, it's really the document is kind of macro level. It's kind of economics and moral principles and labor and capital. So as a financial planner, how I look at this document through, like, okay, how does this apply to a family trying to apply this to their finances? I mean, there's also obviously the employer stuff, which is a big part of the document. But then also it's about, the primacy of the family. So it's, that reminds me of, the duty to educate our children and how the parents are the primary educators of the children. And it even talks about inheritances in here and kind of how that can be a good thing, leaving something to your family. So it even has something to say about estate planning. Mm-hmm. Budgeting based on your values, and not kind of like a consumerist approach to budgeting, and it even brings up, I can't remember where, but having foresight to think about going into careers that can provide for both spouses and children, or whatever situation you think you might be in. So it has a lot of, it really plays into a lot of personal finance.
Yeah, so practical. And from paragraph 5, which I kind of touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to read this because I think it does tie in just kind of a personal finance little blip here. It just says, thus, if he lives sparingly, saves money, and for greater security invests his savings in land, the land in such case is only his wage under another form. And consequently, a working man's little estate thus purchased should be as completely at his full disposal and are the wages he receives for his labor. It puts kind of a bow on everything. Private property, saving, investing, taking care of your family, passing on a little bit to the next generation. It's good stuff.
Amen.
Well, Darren, this was great. Thanks for the time today, and I look forward to maybe doing another one of these videos here in the near future.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, thank you.